Erica, I'm going to hand it over to you. I know we've got questions in the chat, and this has just been a wonderful discussion. So thank you, Erica.
Yeah, thank you all. This has been an awesome discussion. And I think you all covered a lot of really impactful legislation you're working on to impact women and people in general in really amazing ways. So a lot of the questions in the chat are about kind of specific topics that you touched on. So I'm gonna ask the questions, and then if you all have an answer to this particular topic, go for it. Or if just one of you has really touched on this in some of your work, then maybe just one or two of you can answer the question. So we'll just go with that if that's all right. So the first question we had here was from Jill, wanting to know your ideas for working toward a more equitable land ownership. And I think maybe Leondra talked about the farming communities, but I think also this might relate to treaty rights too. So Leondra or Nevada, if you have anything to say about that, or Erin, any of you.
Nevada, do you want to go first?
Yeah, why don't you go first, and I'll kind of collect me.
I think that's an absolutely great question, and it falls for us into equity. And it isn't at the forefront of our work presently, but it is something that is on the agenda or on the horizon. When we talk about inequities, particularly between race, gender, and class, land ownership is huge. Women don't have access to loans. Women in certain racial communities or classes don't have access to capital, tradition of inheritance. So how do we rectify that? And one plan that we worked, it's in the formation stages, but there was an opportunity, a grant opportunity that WoMN Act, 100 WoMN, Gender Justice, and I think three or four other organizations worked on. And one of them was to make sure that women had access to capital. Access to capital means access to land. Unfortunately, we have to pay for land. And so that, when we talk about economic security, land ownership is key, because we in this country determine wealth according to how much land you own or what type of property you have. So it is definitely on our agenda. It falls under just women's economic health and security. So there's more to come. Please sign up for our e-newsletter to stay tuned and to give us some feedback on what it is that you need and how you understand solutions, and we can fold that into our work.
I'll just add a little bit. I mean, I'm taking off my page amendment hat, but I work with Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers across Minnesota. And, we have a lot of conversations around this wealth. I mean, just as a person that's studying like public affairs, like deeply understand that in Minnesota, we are the worst in the nation related to wealth. And that has to do with land ownership, right? So it's with women and with women of color particularly, right? I see Gloria on the call, who's our president of the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. I know that we're having lots of conversations there as well about this issue. And I think that it is like, we have to figure out a way to close that wealth gap, and land ownership is absolutely the path to that. I think also in Minnesota, we have, we think about, kind of gender justice, but also racial justice and equity. And I think that it's really important, and as a citizen of Leech Lake Nation, that we think through what that means in terms of the tribal nations who are here, the treaties that exist, and what treaties have been upheld and maybe not upheld, and how we actually continue to ensure that we're talking not just about gender justice, but also racial justice and sovereignty. And so I know that we are having a lot of conversations in our farmers groups around, I mean, we have Black farmers who are like, I'm trying to reconcile how I can be a landowner on stolen land when I know this is Indigenous land, Dakota, and on Anishinaabe land, and I want to be here and I want to farm and I want to do this work. But I'm having a hard time reconciling, like, what does that mean when am I taking on the oppressor's behavior by doing this? And so and we just have a lot of really deep conversations around that. And I think that as we continue to move forward around equity issues, that it will be important for folks to like educate themselves around the treaties in Minnesota and educate themselves around the tribal nations that you're border cities to, right? And border communities to, and to understand that we have many sacred places in Minnesota, sacred places to us that you might just be walking by every day and not understand that there are connections to our community there. So I think, to me, I think it's more than, it's a policy issue, but it's a cultural issue that I like firmly believe needs to be really thought about in a bigger way than just, like, let's get land into certain people's hands or that kind of thing. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you. Anything to add, Erin? Or okay. This next one was about if anyone was addressing paid leave and recovery for persons experiencing a miscarriage or a death of a child. I think this is coming from the New Zealand law just passed. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Gender Justice is trying to work with legislators on this. We also, because we're part of the Paid Family Medical Leave Coalition, and we're really crucial into writing the family definition, I can tell you that we want to include expansive things, and then often people are like, oh, well, that, Republicans hate it because of this thing, or people hate the bill because of this thing, and they try to take it out. And so we're actually pursuing just kind of standalone bill for that. But yeah, we're really interested in that. I think there are so many ways that we have to acknowledge that humans exist in this world, and miscarriage, the death of a child, is a hugely traumatic, it's out of the natural order of things, as we say, and it's hugely traumatic, and people deserve time to rest and recover and, just grieve. And so we are working to find the right legislators, and hopefully we'll have a bill this year or next year. But in an ideal world, it'd be part of paid family medical leave. But it would also increase the cost, and then some people don't like it. So it is kind of that balancing act.
Thanks. Does anyone have anything else to add to that? Leondra or Nevada? All right. This next one was about the Minnesota legislative definition of mentally incapacitated in regards to rape convictions and plans to change that. I can't remember who touched on that just really briefly, but if any, yeah, Erin, go ahead.
Yep, I think that was me. The first thing I'll say, so for an update, so there was a felony rape case. There was a woman who was sexually assaulted, and the person who assaulted her was not, charged with felony rape. He appealed that all the way up to the Minnesota Supreme Court, and they did not uphold it because the way that the definition of mentally incapacitated in that criminal sexual assault statute is that you can only be mentally incapacitated if someone gave you the alcohol or gave you the drugs. If you yourself were drunk because you drank or you took drugs, then technically, legally, you weren't considered mentally incapacitated. And so when the court wrote their opinion, they explained why they weren't upholding this a sexual assault conviction, and said, if the legislature meant it to be this way, okay, but if not, then you might want to change it. We're working with authors. There is a bill. It's bipartisan. Kelly Moeller is the chief author in the House, and I can try to find the bill number and paste it in the chat. The one thing I'll say is this, is that the solutions to sexual assault, sexual violence are not in the carceral system. Even if the court had upheld that conviction, that wouldn't have changed the fact that that woman was still assaulted. And so we, at Gender Justice, we try to seek solutions that live outside of the carceral system, because that's just never going to be addressing root cause. The best way that we can address sexual assault, sexual violence, unhealthy relationships is through education, through comprehensive sex education, affirmative consent education, which is, yes means yes instead of no means no, that, someone has to affirmatively consent to sexual contact, and not just if they say no, then you stop. And I will also note too that one of the ways that we set up all young people for failure is when we do not teach them, the ways in which they should be modeling behavior and acting around each other. And then often they go to college, and the way that they were taught, right? Like, it's fine if you do this and no means no. That's actually not what the law says. And then they go to college and they learn the hard way, the wrong way, really fast. And so it is deeply unfair the way that we're operating right now. And so that conviction was hard, but I really want us to think about how do we address the root causes for the reasons why people are being assaulted and the reasons why sexual violence exists, instead of like, how do we put more people in jail? And I really hate sometimes that that's like the only thing that can get bipartisan support, is like, how do we make more things a crime and put more people in jail, which again, just never solves the problem.
Thank you. I love how you're getting at kind of root causes instead of easy fixes. Anything to add to that, Leondra or Nevada? Okay, we have two more questions. One is more of the specific issue, and then the other one is broader. So the first one is about access to period supplies, especially for folks in poverty, and access and getting access to more people for that. Has anyone worked on that issue before? Yes.
Yeah. Menstrual equity is really important. It's part of our reproductive justice agenda. It would put menstrual products in all schools. I think it's middle schools and high schools, and then available, I believe, in some colleges as well, and in both bathrooms, right? Because not everybody who has a period identifies as a woman or uses the women's bathroom. Hugely important. It's like, how do you go to school? I mean, we know that girls miss school because they have their period and they don't have menstrual products. So it's just a really important issue. And again, like, I wish sometimes that we could just like strike a bolt of lightning and have men experience like periods and pregnancy and like some of this just for like a year, and then be like, all right, what solutions do you want to do? Because I feel like the political will would be a lot higher.
Yeah, true. This question is for sure for all of you, coming from Rita. And what can rural women in Minnesota do to help your advocacy work? Let's start with Leondra.
Rural women can, one, we always need more members because, as I said, we're collective. So we're a collective of individuals, nonprofits, and businesses. I identify our organization as the fist. Our members are the fingers. We can speak and we can make more progress with a fist than we can an individual finger. We need to understand what your needs and priorities are. We understand advocacy to be both in legislative areas as well as in your day-to-day, week-to-week engagements and practices. So it's policy and practice. That's how we understand change to happen. We want to, when we speak, we want to make sure that we are reflective and we are representing women's voices. And when we talk about women, it's women on, we don't classify it as women who are born with certain genitalia or identify in a certain way, but non-binary, transgender. It's a broader range, which is also a part of our rebranding. We want to incorporate that, your language, your needs in the solutions. We do not solve problems, we work collectively. And we want to understand what are your problems and also what do you consider the solutions to be, and then work to move that forward. So if we don't know what you need, if we don't know what your issues or priorities are, then we can't effectively be a statewide organization or advocate for the areas that are most important to you. So letting us know what they are. You don't have to join to be a member, subscribe to our e-newsletter, and just communicate with us.
Thanks. Nevada?
Yeah, I mean, I think of kind of, there's so many things you can all do. I mean, and I kind of go back to like my Wellstone Action days of like the Wellstone Triangle, like being, you know, people, politics, and policy. So like, I say this because I think that there's probably people on the call that are like, oh, no, I'll never run for office, or no, I don't want to be involved in policy. That's too wonky. Or no, I'm not good at like the community aspect of things. So, but I think that there's a place for every woman on this call to be engaged in work and good work, like related to the Page Amendment or related to the work that EMQ or Leondra is doing. And I would just like call out another person I'll call Beth Peterson. I know was just hired as a state director for Vote Run Lead. And so she's a rural woman. And I think that if you're looking to engage politically and start thinking about running for office, we definitely need more women in positions of leadership. So that's one way. And then I think in terms of policy, like I would love for each of you to sign on to our page pledge and start getting our weekly newsletter and our action updates, and attending our events to learn more. I mean, I know there was a question in the chat from Rita, our mayor in Bemidji, right? And like, what does the page amendment mean to education? Like, does it mean that now we're going to have more private education? Like, these are things that I think are a lot of misconceptions out there around the page amendment. And I want people to engage in our events and our activities and ask these questions, because I think that there's a lot of misinformation, and we're kind of in that age of, social media and people just writing random things out there that are not true. And they may know that they're not true, but they continue to write those things. So and the answer is no, this is not going to lead to vouchers or private education being funded by the state, because it says in our provision, I think 4 different times, that this is focused on public education in Minnesota. And that is where we want to put the focus and the resource to. So I would say, like, yes, get involved, sign up for things, learn more, run for office. I'm always going to tell women to run for office. I think it's really important. And engage your community, talk to others in your community. And right now I understand it's hard to do that, but if you have the ability to have conversations and set up a little Zoom chat with your neighbors to talk about things that matter to you, I think that goes a long way. Thanks.
Erin, we'll have you give the last word here.
Sorry, I was reading Becky's comment in the chat, and now I forgot the whole question. Can you repeat it for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was, how can rural women best engage with your work?
Yes. So it's some of the simplest stuff, right? Signing up for our email list. We send out action alerts to contact your legislators about issues that Gender Justice is working on. When we do lobby day, we send out notifications about that. If you like us on Facebook, like, we go live pretty often to just explain some of the, I always say my job is to explain what we do to regular people, and regular people being anybody who's not a lawyer, which, working at a legal organization, that just kills at legal conferences. But really, we go on Facebook Live a lot to just talk about, what the Supreme Court is doing in the United States or the state of Minnesota. We send out information about bills. So that's a really good way to do that. But, we're a small nonprofit, we're growing, but one of the ways that you can be advocates and get involved with us is to tell us, like, if the way that we're doing it isn't helping you get involved, if the way that we're doing it isn't helping your life, if we're not talking about issues that affect you, or we're leaving you out, let us know. I will put my email address in the chat. I'm pretty responsive. Being in conversation and being in community with one another is kind of a two-way street. And so letting us know, if we're doing things that help and impact you, sharing your stories with us. Like, you could just sit down one night and be like, hey, it's 4 a.m. and I'm awake because I have to work, and I also am homeschooling my kids right now, and all this stuff. Like, that helps me when I'm saying, and this is why we need to have the Office on the Economic Status of Women, because they won't even know the data that this story is explaining in order to make better laws. So sharing your story with me is always super helpful. And if you just add a little, like, you have permission to use these details, not my name or my first name and my location or whatever. And then contacting your legislators. Legislators are just regular, normal people who don't read minds, and oftentimes like to think that everybody in their community thinks exactly the way that they do because they got elected. And so contacting your legislator to know when they've done things well, or if they're not doing things well, is always really helpful for us. Especially, so we have cases about trans students, one of whom is in rural Minnesota, and we've had the most engagement with reaching out to legislators on telling legislators not to criminalize the existence of trans children. Minnesota has the first bill in the nation that would put a trans kid in jail for playing sports. And do you want me to stop? I'm stopping. Oh, okay. I was muted. And so we've had a lot of engagement around that, but we do need legislators in rural Minnesota to hear that, because it's really important, and kids need to know that their community is championing them. So I'll end there, and thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. And at 100 Rural Women, we're here to create connections and inspire leadership. And I just think today was so inspiring for leadership. And this really having these three women present today, these amazing women, it just gives me hope for the future. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thanks everybody who helped with the webinar. We will have everybody's resource links up on the website. We'll have the recording up on the website. So we'll have all of that under the resources tab, and we'll do follow up with you to make sure you have that, as well as a survey to see what you'd like to see next. And end of April, we have Bernadine Jocelyn from Blandon and Tina Maye from Land O'Lakes to talk about the importance of connectivity and broadband in rural. So thank you everybody so much, and appreciate you joining us this morning.